Okay, I'm Bill Borger. William R. Borger is my name, and I'm from Northern Illinois, and I joined the Navy in Northern Illinois and went through Great Lakes Naval Training Station. The next thing I did was take a troop train down to Norfolk, Virginia, where I had orders to board the USS AKA 12 in Norfolk, Virginia. Going down, we had, the troop train had 2 cars of naval people, 2 cars of Army fellas, and at least 2 cars of Marines, but I think might have been a few more. And it was an enjoyable trip, although we couldn't go between cars. We had to stay in our own car. And we had dinner in there.
How long do you think, like, from enlistment from the time you got out? How long, like, roughly do you think it was?
You mean how many years was I in?
Yeah.
I was in almost 4 years. I was in 4 years less 45 days. So.
Yeah. Do you think you got homesick at all?
No, there was times when I wanted to be home. Yeah. But I didn't really get homesick. And I only got seasick once, and that was after I was in there about 1.5 or 2 years, and we were going up to Thule, Greenland, and on the way up, along the New Jersey coast, it was very rough. We had seas of maybe 20, 25 feet, and it just kept pounding, and in fact, a lot of us got sick up there.
Yeah. How many friends and family do you know enlisted too?
In where?
Enrolled in the Navy.
In the Navy?
Yeah.
Do you have any friends?
I have friends that joined the Navy who I had gone to high school with. One joined the Coast Guard. One was on the submarine service. And another one, I don't know where he spent his time, but he was in Jacksonville at the same time I was in Norfolk, Virginia, so I did get to see him one time.
Any, like, people that you've met? Like, any special people?
Yes, because I kept up with a few of my friends off of the ship. And I'm friends with a lot, where I live, in the place where I live, I'm friends with several people who were in service, and in all different types of service. And we talk about it every once in a while when the old folks get together.
So you would say that you keep in pretty good contact with the people?
Yes, I would say
friends?
Normal. I'm not looking for that, but it comes up and we talk about it once in a while. And we have a men's club meeting once a month. And every once in a while we have one of the fellows who was in service talk about his service or something that happened in his service that would be interesting to the rest of the group.
Any special memories that you would like to share?
In service? Yes,
yeah.
Sure. When I was on the ship going into Morehead City, South Carolina, to pick up a Marine regiment and take them for a mock invasion on one of the islands down in the Caribbean, I was put on the wheel of the ship because something had happened and the ship ran up on a sandbar, and I was responsible for getting it back off of there, and that's one of the memories that I remember and tell a lot of people about. Also, we were out doing a NATO exercise with all the countries in NATO. I mean, we had everybody from Norway and Sweden and England and France and Belgium and all the countries from the Mediterranean also. And we had been out on this thing about, several days. And we went back and we started out in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And then we had to go back there, and then you get a grade or a number or something, and then you leave. While we were out, the captain of the ship that I was on was having a special thing done in the sail locker. And nobody knew what it was, and they were sworn not to tell. So they didn't tell. Well, when we left Guantanamo and went out into the ocean, he ran up this flag. It was a black flag with a skull and crossbones on it. And then we got messages, and I was in the teletype room because I was a teleman. And we were getting these messages by radio and by signal and just every way they could give us a signal or ask us what was going on. And the captain sent a message back. He says, "That's the go to hell flag." Then he got in a little trouble over that. But he was a war hero from World War II. I got goosebumps. He was on a destroyer in the Pacific, and he brought this destroyer around the corner of an island over there and found himself sitting under the guns of a Japanese Japanese battleship. He was too close. The battleship could not lower their guns low enough to fire on him. So he had his crew fire on them and fire on the superstructure. He put that battleship on fire, and it never sank, but that was the last of it. The Japs jumped in the water.
Okay, you talk about all these places that you've been to. Any cultural experiences?
Yes, I spent 5 days leave in Rome, and I spent at least a day in the Vatican, and down in the catacombs, the Appalachian Way. Saw just a lot of museums and places that we know back in history and even today. And when I see pictures like of the Vatican or so forth, I can relate to it. Even after these 55 years, it's very interesting to see pictures, or like at Christmas when they're showing pictures of the Vatican for holidays and Christmas and so forth. It's just interesting to see it because I've been there.
Yeah.
And I went to Easter Mass in the Vatican in St. Peter's on Christmas.
It's like, hey, I've been there.
Yeah.
Did you get to eat any foods from the other cultures?
Yes, and actually that's a part of my life. When I go someplace, even today, I like to eat what they're eating. For instance, I know this is off the subject, but I was in Kotzebue, Alaska a few years ago, and I wanted to eat what they ate. That's a very native town in Alaska above the Arctic Circle, and all they do is hunt and fish. They're subsistence livers, and they use the fur of the animals for clothing and so forth, and the food, and so I ate some of their stuff, and I've eaten walrus.
Oh.
So, or tasted it, you might say. And I did the same thing over in the Mediterranean. In Africa, in Oran, Africa, and that was the first place we stopped in when I went into the Mediterranean, I ate some of their food. I don't know what I ate, but it probably was yak.
It's probably good that you don't know.
But a lot of it I have no problem with, and of course I ate food in Turkey, Greece, France, a couple places in Italy, Spain, Sicily, and a lot of those places in Sicily. I'll never forget in Sicily, we had just tied up and was just tied up basically a short time, maybe a couple hours, and here comes a whole bunch of fellows, and each one of them with a big basket like this on one of their shoulders, and one basket would have bread, and one would have lettuce, and one would have some other kind of greens or stuff. They brought all this stuff aboard the ship, and it was, I wish I had a picture of it for you.
That's cool. So, do you guys have any questions yet?
Why did you join the Navy?
Because I didn't want to get in the Army, and I didn't want to go in the Air Force, and I had a little time, had a couple weeks to think about it, and I just thought the Navy was the best place for me because I would probably get around to see more, and I was hoping that I would, and then it did plan out for me, and I'm glad now that I did that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have any regrets at all?
No, I don't have any regrets. There, of course, if you wanted to get into little things, there's a lot of little things that I would like to change, but I don't have any great regrets about anything.
So overall, it was a really good experience.
Yes, very good.
What about like the restaurants? Like anything different from the typical American restaurant?
Just that I had trouble with the language.
Yeah.
But you can find an awful lot of people who know some English, or students that have had some English in schools, in either high school or in colleges, but I would say even more in high schools. And I always said that's why we should have more languages in high schools.
Right.
Now, I went to Mexico one time, and my wife was with me, and she could get along with the Spanish because she had had Spanish in high school.
Yeah. Did you, were you at all prepared for like going off to these different places that you weren't used to?
No.
No.
No. But the thing is, in the Navy, you come back to the ship every night. That's where you sleep. That's where you eat. And you know the people. That's better than going off, would have been better than my going off by myself and trying to navigate a country or countries like that by myself.
How, you were saying? Were you going to say something?
Yeah, when I was in the Navy, I first was a bosun mate, and then I got my rate changed to Teleman third class, and I was put in charge of the post office. Now, the post office is a very little piece of space on a ship. It's about like the smallest bathroom you've ever been in. And there's only room in there for 2 people. And if you're sorting mail or something, there's only room in there for 1.
Airplane
So I got around a lot doing that too, because like in Oran, Africa, that's the way I found the French Foreign Legion base. I had to go out to Port Lyoté, because Port Lyoté is a big air base that was operated by the United States at that time, and that's where your mail came. It came into Port Lyoté, and then it was sent out to other places. When we were in Spain, for instance, the mail would come over from Port Lyoté to Spain, and I, as the mailman, had to be there when that plane come over. He wouldn't land if we didn't have the trucks and the people there to get the mail. He'd just turn around and go back. We never had that happen, but that was what I was always told, and so I was always there.
How was the sleeping arrangements and as far as the environment?
On the ship?
Yeah.
Well, most of where I slept, there were 3 bunks high. There's lower one, middle one, and upper one. And your equipment, your shoes, all your clothes, everything that's personal to you is kept in a locker that is 30 inches by 24 by about 30 deep. So everything goes in there. Now, if you have what I call a pea coat, would you know what a pea coat is?
Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah, it's a jacket. It's a jacket, a heavy jacket. You keep that underneath your mattress on your bunk, because you don't need to cram it in that space, but you keep everything in there. Now, on the ship, we had a laundry room. We had a room where we could get sodas and ice cream and so forth. And we could buy shoes on the ship. We could buy our clothes on the ship. We had 350 men on the ship who run the ship. And then we had a few more on there when we had troops on there.
How would you say the equipment was like? Very complicated at all?
The equipment? My equipment wasn't complicated.
Yeah.
The teletype machine, I had to learn that after I changed rank. But I learned it, and I also learned to blow the bosun pipe. I don't know if you know what a bosun pipe is or not, but that's where you pipe people aboard. You pipe reveille, and you pipe when they're supposed to go to sleep and so forth, or general quarters and so forth. And I learned to do that, and I learned to do that because I would go down in the ship to the bottom, and I'd sit down there by myself and learn to blow the thing. So, and I did real well at that. And a lot of times, especially when we had some dignitaries coming aboard, they used to call me especially to go up and do that. And they did the same thing to me when I went to, we had a trip on a holiday up to Bangor, Maine. And Bangor, Maine is up in the state of Maine, about 20 miles up from the ocean. And when we were getting close up there to the port, I was called and asked if I would take the wheel and take us up, get us up to Bangor, Maine, because you go up this river. and they were just worried about hitting rocks or something because we drew so much water on that thing, and they didn't want to have any problems. So, but that's the most beautiful trip, because you're going through a bay and a river, and you have these lighthouses on both sides and these nice dwellings, because a lot of ship captains live up there. They've retired and bought property up there along that river, and it's just a beautiful scenery. And a lot of people spend money for that trip on different ships, boats, ships, and here I get it free. Of course, I had to be in there 4 years, but
Yeah. But would you say that they called you up to take over the wheel very often?
there were several of us on the ship that were good at it, and I was probably one of 6. So yes, every time we would get to a place that was a little bit rough, one of us got called. It all depended on if we had just done a job or something, maybe not. But if we were off and they could get us to do it, they got us to do it. And sometimes it was just to stand by and make sure the guy that was on there was doing it properly, because you have to train people. I was trained not well when I first did that one down at Moorhead City, but if you got the knack for something like that, you pick it up real fast. It's like you do sometimes with your typewriters or your machinery.
Computers. Yeah. Did the training take very long?
No, the boot camp training is 12 weeks, or was 12 weeks when I did it, and we're taught to tie knots and do a lot of marching. They get you in good physical shape. That's one of the main things of it. And well, I didn't tell about that either. And you learn to shoot guns. And you learn to shoot guns in the training on the ship also. But in Great Lakes, when they first took us down to the rifle range, the first gun I shot was a 45. And you can't aim a 45 very well for much distance, but I did a real good job, and they were impressed by it. So the next gun I got was an M1. And an M1 is a heavy gun. I forget how much it weighs, but it's a heavy gun. And I hit the bullseye right away, and the sergeant didn't like it. He thought I was, I don't know what, you know. And he come running over there to me, and he said, "I bet you can't do that again." And I said, "Well, give me another slug." And I hit it 3 times, and then they took me off and said, "Well, that was really something," and that they hadn't had anybody do that for some time. Guys coming in, of course, a lot of guys are nervous now. When I was on the farm, I was a hunter, and I liked to hunt, and I never, or I won't say never, but after I had hunted a little while, I never would shoot something that wasn't running. I wouldn't shoot something that's sitting still, like a rabbit. I'd rather shoot a rabbit if he was running, and I used to get him about 50% of the time when they were running. So I was a good shot.
So you had experience before.
Yes.
Yeah. So anything that you picked up on, like other things that you didn't have to do that you've seen like other men do?
Well, for instance, the post office job. I had seen this guy in the post office job, and he had a sweet job. You know, he didn't work too hard. He had to go get the mail, and sometimes you're off getting mail when you should have been eating dinner or something. But I saw him do this, and I thought it was a good job. And he had a little truck. We had a little truck on the ship that was for the postman, and that was his truck. So he was getting out. He was going to get discharged because he'd been in for his period of time. And I said, "Who's going to get that job when you leave?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "I'd like to have that." He said, "Well, I'll tell my officer." So he did, and that officer came out on the deck one time looking for me, and he said that Ronnie Flocken said that I would like to have that job. I said, "Yeah, I really would," because what I was doing a lot of chipping of paint and painting and hung over the side. You've seen them down on the side of the ship painting and that. And I didn't like that. So then they said yes, and they took me up to the captain at some point, and the captain said, "Well, I'll try and get your service changed from bosun mate over to Telemann." And at that time, I was a third-class bosun mate. So they got that changed over to a teleman, and that's not the usual thing for different classes to do. And it worked out real well. Now, when you go at night and have to get mail, and you miss your dinner, you're really taken care of, because the cooks, everybody on a ship wants mail, because that's something from home. And they want their mail to go off too, to go home to their wives and girls and mothers and so forth like that. So if I was out late and come back, the guys in the kitchen would either have a dinner waiting for me, and I got goosebumps again, or I'd just go by and say, "You got anything for me to eat?" And they would make something for me to eat, and that was a big deal. And they always took care of me. And I remember one time, well, when we got to the Mediterranean, we'd been underway going to the Mediterranean 10, 12 days. I can't remember exactly. So you got a lot of mail. You got 350 crew on there, and you got 150 Marines on there. So you got a lot of crew, and that's a lot of mail. When we got that mail, I had to go get the mail for the Transport 21, and that was 6 ships. So we got that, and we got back to the ship, and then I called all those other ships, and they came to our ship and picked up their mail for their ship. But we had that mail to distribute to all those people, and they're waiting for it. I mean, they're waiting in the ways on the ship, waiting for their mail. So you gotta give it out to them right away. I mean, you got to do it. And we had maybe a dozen bags of mail or more, and the mail bags probably weighed about 80 pounds. They were stuffed full of mail. So I went down to my little post office, and I couldn't get them all in there, of course. So we piled them outside, and you can always get a work crew when you're doing mail. The people just come from anywhere. If you just go up to the PA system and tell them you need a work crew of 6 or 8 or whatever you want, and they'll be there right now to help you. So I got another fellow to come in the post office with me, and we gave mail out for a couple bags, and then we'd get another couple bags in there and pass it out and so forth. Well, when we got done, it was about 8 o'clock. And that kitchen had meals for about 8 guys they had made up special for us, and it probably was steak, because they always used to give me a steak because they just liked, and they were very nice people.
How were the letters to and from your family and friends?
Well, I had a lot of girlfriends that I wrote to. Now, I don't mean that they were girlfriends. I mean, there were a lot of friends of mine that I knew in high school and around the community that I wrote to. And my mother wrote me every time I wrote her. And I had 2 sisters, and they would write me. And it went pretty good. And all the mail goes to New York City, Fleet Post Office, U.S. Navy, New York City, and then it's distributed from there. So we get our mail from New York City to the Mediterranean or wherever you were. We didn't get mail in Greenland. In fact, we took mail to Greenland, to Thule, Greenland. That was a good trip too, but it's kind of a dull trip. There's not much going up, and there's not much coming back except cold weather and winds and high seas. And actually, we were up there, when we got up there, it was probably around the 8th, 10th of September, and the waters at the edge of the island were already starting to freeze. And I don't mean just 2, 3 feet out. I mean maybe 10 or 25 feet out at certain points. We're starting to freeze and get solid. And we had to get up there and unload. We had a bunch of pallets with airstrip material. And it's an airstrip that you can put down fast to land a plane on. And of course, what they were doing is trying to get this up there and get it down before the weather got bad that they couldn't get it in there. And the strips that you put down, they're about 6 feet long and about 3, 4 feet wide, and they're on pallets. And the pallets are about 6 feet by 4 feet or something. They're heavy. They weigh tons. So you got to get it up there and get it down, and then they've got to lay it down. Now the Seabees lay it down, but we have to take it up. And that was a cold, cold trip. And when we were taking it off, there again, I ran a excuse me. I ran a thing that took it off. You you swung it over and you hooked onto the pallet and you picked it up, you brought it over and you set it down on a boat. But we had to take it in on boats, on small boats, because there was no dock there to tie up to or anything, and you can't get in close to the shore. We had 37 feet of water underneath us. Crane is what the word I'm trying to use. It's a crane. And I used to operate that also. So we would take it off and put it in the boat. Well, if you lost a guy over the side into the water, he couldn't take it very long because the water was below 40 degrees in temperature. And what happens in 40 degrees or below, you may already know this, your body will only work for a short period of time. You might be able to swim 10 minutes. I doubt if you could swim much longer than that because your body gets stiffer and stiffer, and you just can't do it.
Have you ever known of anybody falling over?
Yes, we had a fella fall over in Norfolk, Virginia. We were anchored out, and he fell over, and one of my good buddies, Earl Sullivan, tried to go in after him, but never could reach him or find him, and he was gone just like that. He never came back up. And it was a cold day too. It was a wintertime deal. We also lost one off the back of the Libra coming back from the Mediterranean. He was a Marine. He went over with everything he had, everything he owned. And nobody knows why. It was just thought that maybe he got a Dear John letter, something of that nature, and he went over, and they couldn't find him. We spent a full day trying to find him. We went backwards and tried to find this guy and circled. And of course, not only our ship, but we had the whole fleet that did maneuvers trying to find this guy. He's gone.
Did you know anybody personally, like a friend?
No, I didn't know him personally, nor the one that went over in Norfolk. I didn't know either one of them personally. I knew who the one in Norfolk was, but I didn't know him. I didn't know him any better than I know you.
So, would you say that harsh weather was like the typical environment, like different places that you went, or was it like?
Well, the environment and the weather in the Mediterranean, I don't think we had much trouble with it. Now, it was cool in like Turkey, Greece, Naples, Italy, but not further north. Those countries, because of the Mediterranean water and the waters around those countries, they're really warmer than the center like of the United States is when it's cold. And they just stay milder. So no, I didn't have any trouble with the weather.
That's good. So what were the activities that the men would do on the ship to keep each other busy?
Play poker. No, and we had boxing matches on the ship also. They'd pair up fellas who would want to box a little bit, and we'd have a boxing match. And we had a film almost every night on the ship, and anybody could go to them. And we carried a lot of films wherever we went. We carried enough to get to the Mediterranean, and then we would swap films with other ships. Everybody had some films, and then they would just swap them back and forth until everybody had seen the films. And we saw great films, and I always used to like the musicals, although that kind of a film.
Did you take part in the boxing? Did you?
No, I was chicken.
Was there any betting on, I think this guy.
Oh yes, we always had a bet on for what time we would either raise the anchor or drop the anchor. In other words, all the way to the Med, people were betting on what time we dropped the anchor at Oran, Africa. And then when it dropped, that's recorded in the log of the ship. And that becomes the thing that, and if anybody had a slip with that 10:29, that was the winner then. And used to do that at every place that we anchored. Yeah.
Would they ever bet on boxing?
Yeah, there was bets on the boxing.
Yeah.
I don't think there was supposed to be, but there was plenty of bets on the boxing. Yeah, we played a lot of cards. We had a TV on there, but now in the Med it was kind of rough, and of course that was 1952 and 53, so was way back there when little ones. I saw Joe Louis on boxing, but that was when I was in Norfolk, Virginia.
So you took part in the poker. Did you
Some, yes.
lose any money?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I don't think I ever play poker without losing money. Today, but tomorrow I'll lose double or something.
Do you guys have any?
You mentioned the Mediterranean. Do you have any like memories like from that, like during the Mediterranean?
Well, I enjoyed the Mediterranean, and I really enjoyed a lot of the trips that I took. And did I tell about the restaurant here? I didn't tell about the restaurant, did I?
I don't think so.
Okay. In France. I was in France for 2 weeks twice. So I spent a total of a month on the French Riviera. And one of the little trips I took, we went out and we saw a perfume factory and a soap factory and the countryside. And then we were getting into the evening and we went to this restaurant. They were going to take us to this restaurant. And when we drove in, it's like coming into a barnyard. You see these pens, and they've got chickens in a pen, and ducks in a pen, and geese in a pen, and maybe even pigs. I can't remember. But they had all these things. And what you do is you pick out what you want to eat. If you want to eat a chicken, you pick out the chicken. If you want to pick a duck, you pick out the duck. And then you're supposed to get that for your meal. And what you do while they're cooking it is you go into a big room, and they got nice lounges and chairs and stuff, and they got people over there singing and doing jokes and so forth, so that you've got some entertainment while you're waiting for your dinner. And then when your dinner is ready, they come and get you and take you back to a table, and they serve it. But it's a real nice restaurant, and I really enjoyed that. I think it was different than I'd ever had or knew about, and so that was good. Now in Rome, I liked Rome. Just beautiful city, and fairly clean. The people were nice. You could always find somebody to speak English, and they were usually students.
You said you did farming and everything before
Yes.
you enrolled.
Yes.
Anything that kind of helped you out from when you went off? when you
Well,
away from
I
home?
don't think so, but I grew up on that farm, and we were 9 miles from the nearest town, and I went to a one-room schoolhouse and for 8 grades, and then I went to high school, and during the time, even when I was in that first 8 grades, I trapped for my money, or part of my money. I trapped muskrats, weasels, what's the expensive fur? Mink. I always got a couple of mink. Now, we didn't get much for these furs because this was late 1940s. And the muskrat fur was worth about $1.50. And even my father used to kill skunks and skin them. Now, what would happen is I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go out on my trapping in the wintertime. That's when you trap in the wintertime. I'd go out on my traps, run my traps, and bring them home. And most usually, my father would skin them for me while I was gone, which was a big help to me, because that 4 o'clock in the morning is early. And sometimes it's cold. And I've been out there on them traps, and it'd be below 0. So it was really mean and miserable sometimes. And I was out there in snow blizzards and so forth doing that too. Now, another thing, when we went to high school, I had a sister that was 2 years older than I was. We used to ride a bus, and then we'd ride a bus to within about a mile of our house or our farm. Well, one time, the bus started out from the little town. And the little town was called Dakota, Illinois. And they only went about 2 miles out of Dakota, and it was such a blizzard that the guy couldn't really see to drive, and it was piling up on his windshield and everything, so he dumped all the kids off. And there weren't very many on there, maybe a half a dozen, but most of them were close to home. We was the furthest away. We were about 3 miles from home. So we're going down the road, and I got my sister behind me, and we're trying to get home, and it was just white from road to road and from telephone pole to electric light pole. It was just one mass of snow. But we did get home. And boy, was I glad to get home that day.
Do you miss the cold at all?
I do. I love Florida. and I've been here a long time. But when I first came down here, there were a couple of 2-3 years when I really wanted to go back because I liked the ice skating. And I did a little bit of skiing, but I liked it. And the hunting, I liked the hunting. I only shot 1 deer in my life, but I'd like to have had some more, but you couldn't pay me to do it now.
Going to all the different countries, when you had to come back to the U.S., how did that, like, that make you appreciate it more?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Everybody on that ship wanted to get home. Everybody. There wasn't anybody that wanted to stay there. And I wanted to get home. We couldn't wait to get home. And when they left the Mediterranean, that captain put that ship on flank speed, which is not very much for that kind of a ship. But we headed for home, and we didn't wait for other ships. We just went home. Mm-hmm. I have another story about the captain on that ship. We were coming back from one of the trips. I don't know which one it was, and there's a long lane into Norfolk, Virginia, probably 20 miles or more. And he's coming in and he's asking for a tug because with that size ship, you have to have tugs to tie you up at a pier. You can't go in by yourself. Well, that's wrong because that's what I'm going to tell you. He kept calling in to the naval place and telling them he wanted tugs. And they kept telling him they didn't have tugs for him. They didn't have a place, or they didn't have a place for him to tie up. So he kept saying, well, I'm coming into the pier. I'm going to get to a pier. I got to get to a pier. And he kept coming and he kept coming. And I knew they were mad at him for what he was doing, but he stuck right to it. And when we got maybe a half a mile from the pier, they sent him tugs and they tied us up.
How were you said you wanted to take tours when you went to the different places. How were they, like the sites that you got to see?
There'd be somebody aboard the ship who would get the information from the ground, and then they would announce it over the PA system, and then you would go and sign up for it and give them your money. Each one of them little trips cost us like $10 or $15. And it might even been one that was 25. And there were some trips that I couldn't take. For instance, there was a trip to Switzerland, which I couldn't take because it was probably $150 or something. I didn't have that kind of money. You know, we only got $48 a month. So I couldn't go on that one. And there was one to Paris. They went to Paris too. The second time that we went and stayed in the south of France, that's when they had the trip to Paris. We had gone over to Spain, and we were supposed to leave the Mediterranean from Spain because we were almost out of the Mediterranean there. But something happened, and so they sent us back to France and gave us this trip to Paris. Of course, not many people went on that trip either. That was the most expensive trip, and I don't know how much it was. And of course, I would like to have gone.
Right. What did the money for the tours go to?
Those cities. A lot of what we did was help the people in the Mediterranean, all of those countries. This was, shortly after World War II. Even though it was 5-6 years, those people are not on their feet from a hard war like that. So what we did there is all the money of those sailors got, that money was spent in those countries, or most of it was spent in those countries. And one of the nice things was when we were in Oran, Africa, after dinner that night, the first night, the garbage was put down into a bin on the pier, and we saw some young fellows, there was 3 of them came, to get food out of that bin. And that just is bad for you. These people are poor, very poor. One of those fellows didn't have legs from his knees down, and the 2 other fellows carried him. They carried him on a chair, just an old chair. After that day, or after maybe 2 days or something, our people in the sail locker, which is a carpenter shop also, they made him crutches and a chair that those fellows could carry a lot easier, and they put wheels on the bottom of it so they could sit him on a piece of concrete or asphalt and roll him around a little bit. But that was good. Now, also, especially in that town, I saw sailors give away their shoes. They'd see some worker going home or something without shoes and walking all over the place. They would take their shoes off and give it to them. And I think it happened in other countries, but I didn't really see it and I don't really remember. I think it was, to me, it was just terrible that people don't have shoes.
Do you think that the people that had less in those countries that you're talking about, do you think that they were like a little bit more generous and appreciative than the typical American?
Yes. I think we were very well treated. I don't think the sailors and Marines and so forth are treated as well today over there as we were at that time. We went into Spain and we were there just after they had had some type of a civil war and one of the first ships to go in. And some of the people, mostly girls, came out of the olive orchards to work in the bars and the restaurants and the clubs to service the sailors. And they were just so appreciative of the money that they got from these sailors. And a lot of sailors will give money away to help somebody.
You spent all this time on this ship. Did you actually get to witness any live combat?
No, no combat. Well, now we had live combat. We had at least 4 places in the Mediterranean where NATO ships joined us and we put on a mock invasion. We did it in Turkey, we did it in France, and we did it in Italy. And I think there was a 4th place, and it probably was an island, one of the islands. But that we had live ammunition, we had aircraft, we had firings from both ships with large guns onto an island, and then we'd put the Marines ashore. The thing is, you do those so that you get faster at getting Army on shore. When we first started it in in South Carolina, the first time it took us, I don't know how many hours, maybe 85 hours. I'm just using words here now. The next time it might have taken us just 72 hours to do it. And then over in the Mediterranean, we knew what we were supposed to do and so forth, and you could do it in a lot less time and take them back aboard in a lot less time also.
Go ahead.
Did you ever get to fire any of the weapons?
Yes, yes. I worked a 40 millimeter double gun. We had, I think, 4 of those on the ship. We had a 5-inch gun on the ship and probably 6 or 8 20 millimeter guns on the ship. Now those are mainly for anti-aircraft, because we weren't a type of ship who would go into battle to take something. We were keeping planes and stuff off of us because we carried all the equipment and stuff. Now also on that ship, I'll tell you another thing. We had a reefer deck. Now a reefer deck is refrigerated. Okay? So we would have fresh foods and stuff on there for a while anyway. Also coming back, we'd bring back bodies. Whatever country you're in, if it's an American and they died over there or got killed over there in some way, the Navy will bring them back. I don't think it cost them a penny to bring them back. So we would put those bodies in that reefer deck when we came back. Now the reefer deck was not probably quite as big as this room, but it's a big room.
Was that sort of hard to see the? Did you actually see the bodies?
No, I didn't actually see the bodies. No, I used to load some of them. I'd pick them up with that crane and put them down in that reefer deck.
Was that a little hard to?
Well, yeah, you think about it. I think you think about it afterwards or before.
But now what?
No, it doesn't. That didn't bother me too much. No.
What about the time on the ship? Do you think that the time from stop to stop was a little bit longer for you to bear?
No, because I used to like it. A lot of times at night, I'd get up, couldn't sleep or something. I'd get up and go out and sit on deck and watch the stars and the moon or the ocean or just the breeze and so forth. I'm the kind of person who can be alone and not have too much. I guess I do a lot of daydreaming or something. I'd write letters to my girlfriend.
Would you say that that now you miss the ship or anything from back in the day?
There are times when I'd like to have a day on it or a couple of days on it or a trip on it because I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy all of the whole 4 years. I didn't enjoy that. I didn't want that for the rest of my life. That wasn't any part of it. So as soon as I could get out, I got out. That's how I got out a little early. I got out a little bit before my 4 years was up, but it was coming up Christmas. I had a lot of vacation time due, and so I had heard that you could put in a piece of paper that would ask them to let you out a little bit early, and I did. I put it in so that I could get out, and I got out on the 14th of December, so I was home for Christmas.
Did you miss not being there for Christmas while you were in service?
Yes, very much. Oh yeah, you miss your holidays, and they're kind of the ship is so much quieter on a Christmas or an Easter or any holiday. It's just down. That's all. You're just not working hard. Nobody has to work those holidays anyway, so there's nothing being done except what has to be done to keep the ship running if it's running. Yeah.
Did the sailors exchange presents on Christmas and that kind of stuff?
No.
They could?
No.
Do they celebrate Christmas or Easter in any way?
Well, they always have a Christmas dinner, and usually it's, turkey and stuffing and whatever, cranberry sauce and all that kind of good stuff. Mm-hmm. And they'll say Merry Christmas to each other and talk to each other a little differently. And of course you have church on the ship just like you have church on land. We had a minister on there all the time. We had a doctor on the ship. We sent a person who had appendix problem on the ship, and we transferred him from ship to ship underway over to the Mediterranean. And you do that with pulleys and lines. And what you do first, to get one line over to another ship, you pull up alongside them, but you're about 100 feet away from them, and then you shoot a line over to that other ship. And then that little line pulls a bigger line over, and then pretty soon you've got these pulleys rigged, and you've got a thing with the guy laying in it that you send over to the other ship. We did that going over. And when they parted and they got all the lines back, the one ship went the wrong direction and went into the side of the other ship. And they had some small boats called LCVPs hanging on the side, and when our ship hit that ship, they lost 2 of those. They just smashed them. And our captain sent a message over to him, said, "You had 2 too many anyway." Well, they didn't really, because that's federal property, but they did. That captain, he was a good captain. Did I tell about him sinking that battleship here?
I don't think so.
Okay. He was in that captain. Captain Donald O'Donnell was his name. He was a captain on our ship, and he had been in World War II and was a World War II great hero. He was running a destroyer, and he was over in the islands, the South Pacific Islands in the Pacific, and they were having naval battles, and he came around the corner of an island and was sitting under the guns of a Japanese battleship. In other words, the Japanese battleship could not shoot him with their guns because they couldn't lower him enough. He was that close. So he had his guns fire upon him, and he told the gunners to hit the superstructure. So they hit the superstructure of that ship, and it got on fire, and the ship didn't sink, but they couldn't do anything with that ship, and a lot of the Japanese sailors jumped overboard into the water. And some of the American ships picked some up and some didn't, but they lost a lot of men. And they actually lost that ship. They had to tow it back someplace. We have no idea where.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think we've covered a lot of it. There's probably a lot that I have not remembered.
Yeah. All right.
But
Well, thank you.
very
okay.
much.
Well, I've enjoyed it too. So
Lovely.
brought back a lot of memories. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.